Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond Disabilities. This time we're looking at dyspraxia and I'm joined by my brilliant guest today, Rosemary. Rosemary is a writer, editor, public speaker, specialising in disability and neurodiversity related subject matter, and she is the author of Stumbling Through Space and Time, Living Life with Dyspraxia. Her writing has also been featured in Travel and Leisure, Broken Pencil Magazine, Happyful Magazine, and a long list of other websites. So thank you for coming onto the podcast, Rosemary. Please can you introduce yourself?
Currently I'm a Canadian, as many can hear by my accent, but I'm based over in Morocco right now. So basically, as the bio said, my life is divided between writing books, writing articles, working with corporate clients, that kind of thing, on getting the tone of disability-related resources just right.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So could you describe what is dyspraxia to you and how does it affect you on a daily basis?
Yeah, so dyspraxia is a coordination condition. It's about the coordination of movement and that process your brain goes through when you coordinate everything from riding a bike to tying your shoelaces to even moving through an environment and understanding what going right or left means, or what being in a crowd might mean for where you need to move and where you need to go and things like that.
I completely relate with that. I've got dyspraxia as well, and it's a whole makes life more interesting, especially simplest of things like walking down the street or something, or walking in a straight line. Definitely makes life a bit varied. So can you explain when you were first diagnosed and the process of how you were diagnosed? It'd be interesting to hear the difference between in Canada and like the UK where I am.
Yeah, honestly, it was pretty similar from what I've heard from many of my British friends. I was diagnosed at the age of 4. And the thing was, there wasn't really a lot of resources around at the time. It was the mid 90s. And the only reason I was able to get a diagnosis was because many of the practitioners around that diagnosed me had a very progressive look at neurodiversity that was a little ahead of their time. And my dad hadn't been in Canada for very long. He's originally from Oxford, so he also fortunately started to have access to some resources from the Dyspraxia Foundation, and that enabled the process really of going through the GP to a psychologist that looked at it, and then to further along the process with occupational therapists and things like that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, it doesn't sound too different from the UK then. And Oxford is a lovely place to be part of the UK. And it's similar, right? It seems to have got worse as the years gone on. Like I know I was diagnosed at 2 years old, and I know from friends who were either waiting diagnosis or weren't diagnosed till they were in their 20s or teenage years. That certainly seems to be a big delay for some reason. I don't know what, but especially in females, I think as well, they find it it's more difficult for them to get a diagnosis from like the female friends I've been speaking to who have dyspraxia. So what were your family's reactions and emotions when you were first diagnosed?
My parents were honestly pretty supportive for the most part, but they're very neurotypical, non-disabled people. So I think the real adjustment was figuring out how to think in a different way and how to adjust to someone who thinks in a different way. They were extraordinary advocates where they didn't let anyone make any sort of decisions that weren't in my best interest. But at the same time, I think there was a bit of a mindset adjustment to understand on their end, which is perfectly acceptable from what I've heard from talking parents too. That's pretty normal.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's sort of a learn what works for the child or what works for yourself. It's good to not hear that your parents were so like ahead of their times or advocating and they had your best interests at heart. It's similar to my mum, like she had to battle a lot of things and against like some local council decisions in school to get support in place. It shouldn't have to be a battle, but it was. So I'm glad that it was good for you and that you managed to get all the support you need. And do you think that that is hard for women to get diagnosed? And if so, why do you think that is?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is because women, there's sort of a strange societal thing, especially around all the sort of pop culture, like Manic Pixie Dream Girl stuff.
Yeah.
That means that so many of the traits can simply be dismissed as someone being a little quirky or a little clumsy or something like that. And I think, especially as I got older, I found that more and more where because I didn't really fit a really typical type of disabled or really because I tried very hard to get involved in running and physical activity and things like that. It was hard to sort of battle against societal norms of what needing support looks like.
I'm sorry to hear that you had that battle, but I do understand what you mean. Like again, that I relate that I tried hard to get into sort of like physical activity, even like going to the gym or something. Like personally, like it's very hard, and just you see people going like really fast on a treadmill or something, and then they just sort of can just look down at you, and they don't understand that, oh, I've got a hidden disability, I've got dyspraxia, I need to take more time, I can't just go run a marathon. As much as it'd be a great achievement to do, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, it takes extra time. It takes a different approach. Even for myself behind the scenes, there were things that were much more specific to women, like physical appearance and figuring out, like, even did I feel comfortable in makeup? Did I feel comfortable in different clothing, hygiene, and things that I think quietly I was struggling with behind the scenes, but took some time for me. And it meant socially, I couldn't just make it a public thing.
Yeah, no, it's those sort of things that people don't think about, is it? It's like they just take it for granted. Like, I know I can't really like comment because I'm a man that don't wear makeup, but like other like women just don't think about like, oh, might find it difficult wearing makeup. It might be difficult wearing certain sort of types of clothes or shoes or things like that, and that they might need extra support. It's just there's no real support, I think, on that side of things. And even like for me personally, like processing information as well, like a common trait of dyspraxia, I think, as well, is like I tend, not all across the board, but I tend to take longer to process information. It takes me a bit, even if it's a few more seconds or things that people just don't really think of. They just think, oh, you're a bit slow. And that's not the case at all. Just need more time to process it and come out with whatever action or result you need.
Yeah, and I think that can be the hard part because socially people are seeing sort of a narrow window of things. And I found that it was very extraordinary for me even to get a sunflower lanyard finally, because I really have found that even when I travel or things
Yeah.
like that, that I would be misunderstood as shouting at someone or something like
Yeah.
that, when really I was just struggling to figure out how to understand something is over there or
Yeah.
something like that.
Oh, I'm sorry how difficult to get in a like sunflower land. Like over here, it's sort of become easier because I think the scheme started out of here, but we're sort of like the more discreet about it now. So, for example, some rail train stations over here, they hand out the lanyards and things. They don't ask for any proof, but they just like do it on good faith, if you like. And same with some supermarkets have started it. So it's a shame. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, it becomes easier in the future. And like especially with the shouting thing, I agree that some people, I can either be really loud but not intentionally trying to like shout, or be really quiet. So I don't have that
Yeah.
middle ground.
Yeah, it came to Canada fairly recently. It came during COVID,
Oh wow.
and it's only really started to spread to some other countries too. And that's been really extraordinary for me as someone also who is part of my lifestyle travels around a lot.
What's it like? I know this wasn't on the list of questions, but what's it like? You said you're in Morocco at the moment. Do you notice a difference between Canada and Morocco in their attitude to hidden disabilities at all?
Yeah, it's quite significant. It's important to remember that you're looking at different types of countries
Yeah.
completely. And I think that honestly, even though some of the services and support isn't here yet in like a formal sense,
Yeah.
I think that there's a very real attempt to just to help people if you need help. And there's less of a question and what you deserve and what you don't deserve. So I find that very comfortable, and that very much makes up for the fact that the awareness isn't here so much yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. It's good to hear that even though the awareness isn't there and formally the sport's not there, it's good to know that sort of as a society over there, sorry, that lost my train. That the society over there, that they are supportive and that like will help you out if you do need it.
Yeah, and there isn't really any questions asked.
Oh, that's
And,
brilliant.
yeah, and I mean, I freelance, so most of what I'm looking at from a professional point of view is more through like a UK, US,
Yeah,
Canada bubble, anyways.
yeah. No, recently, yeah, noticed similarities. I recently went to the US for the first time, and honestly, that I was surprised in a good way that how sort of helpful like staff at the airport were, for example, with my hidden disabilities lanyard, asking me if I needed any help and things like that. It's really good because didn't realize it was that widespread over there in the States. So it's really
Yeah, they're really trying. I remember my mother was in Washington recently, and she took a picture of uh, Dulles Airport,
yeah.
and there was a very prominent picture of the lanyard, and that was good bit
Wow.
of news to see. Because last time I was there was quite a few years ago,
Yeah.
and I found it very overwhelming to be amongst sort of the hectic crowds of it all.
No, I can imagine airports are very busy places and that you just need that extra support, just either like a separate like quiet room or I know with the airline I went on, they had sort of separate boarding for people with disabilities and they didn't sort of question saying, oh, just for people with physical disabilities. It's very inclusive of all hidden disabilities as well. So it's really nice to see.
Yeah.
So please can you tell me if your dyspraxia has it had any impact on any friendships or relationships? And if so, if you had to make any adjustments to either your behavior or another person's behavior to support with yourself with your disability.
Yeah, it was more early on in my life because I didn't really openly disclose until like my late 20s when I
Yeah.
started to meet other dyspraxics. Um, and I think when I met my spouse, it was really socially, it was a real important moment for me where that was really the first time where I felt comfortable to just be
Yeah.
quite vulnerable about what I could do and what I couldn't do. And from there, really, I started to feel much more comfortable and open. I think that made my relationships better. But prior to that, there was plenty of bullying. There was plenty of stuff like that that made it really hard to speak up. So it's changed significantly.
Oh, I'm really sorry you went through bullying. Like I until recently had a similar thing like with bullying and people sort of taking advantage and being horrible because of disabilities. But glad like your partner, your spouse has been really accommodated as well. I think recently, like personally, I've only in the last few years I've really found friends that have really sort of accepted me for me and are willing to make accommodations and things like that. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, it's really something I hear in the community a lot, and I always try to give people as much hope as I can that they can find people that accept them for who they are.
Absolutely, that's such a brilliant thing because it does get better. Like we're both proof of it. Like it just takes time. It's about like trying to get through the hard times and sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So you've written a brilliant book called "Stumbling Through Space and Time: Living with Dyspraxia." Please, could you tell me how did the idea for the book come about, and could you describe what's inside it?
Yeah, so it was something I thought about for years. It was really a lot of things, conversations and stories I had to repeat over and over again of how dyspraxia affected my life and things that were showing up in journal entries and conversations with
Yeah.
people. So I really took a broad range of subjects from relationships to travel to my experiences professionally in order to condense it into very simple, easy to understand stories that help people see what a dyspraxic mind can look like and how you can navigate the world.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Sort of like a dyspraxia survival guide then.
Yeah, using more stories from my own life and random research I found from being part of the community, being part of events, being figuring out what people were worried about, what they wanted to see more of in terms of their friends, their family, their peers.
I think it's a brilliant book. And when I was growing up, certainly over here, there wasn't any sort of support books or books based off of people's experience to just help. Sort of felt very isolated growing up. And that it wasn't until, say, for me over here, it wasn't until probably 2012, I think, when we had the Olympics over in the UK, that there was a show over here called The Last Leg, which is sort of a panel show, but it's a comedy panel show, but two out of the three presenters, they both got disabilities. So it's the first time it's sort of publicly shown. Even with the Paralympics, I think that year there was something special. So for me, like, it wasn't until then I was really properly comfortable with my disabilities. And now I'm similar to with your book. That's one of the reasons why I want to do the podcast, sort of give hope, help people, talk to amazing people like yourself, and sort of spread awareness and give confidence, hopefully, to people with disabilities. So what challenges do you currently face at all, like during your day-to-day life, if you have any, with the disability?
Yeah, yeah, really, it's about the fact that really I'm not used to being around much awareness, really. So it's more about finding the words
Yeah,
to say when I come across challenges, whether it be in like a call with a client or it be like I'm just trying to get from point A to B and the instructions are just not quite going through my head. It's more about those little moments where um, I can't find the words to say it and I'm stressed out and I can't say the words that I think nowadays most of the challenges are. And I always find I have to really check myself and breathe through it and figure out like, okay, how can I just get through this and solve this and find coherent
yeah.
language to say this, which people are always surprised by because I've written about it, I've like talked about it publicly, but really when you're in the moment and you're stressed out about it, it gets so hard to put the words together.
Yeah, I know what you mean completely. That it is different. Like, you can write, but then when you're writing, you have time to, like, if you're on the computer, you have time to sort of think what you're going to say, have that time to process it, and for thoughts to come to your brain into your hands. And if you want to like type it out, and but you're right, in the moment in a conversation, it's quite hard, like for someone with dyspraxia, to be sort. I'm going to say spontaneous because I can't think of another word, but yeah, sort of try to react there and then. Like, we do need extra couple of minutes, which I think society is slowly changing and becoming more accepting, but I think more work needs to be done on that front and understand that we process and like information and thoughts at different times. So we can't just be like bang, 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 that just like really quick and think of our feet.
Yeah, and there's that freezing thing. My mother always so coherently described it as there's that element of mentally sometimes you can just freeze, and sometimes that can be really hard to work around.
I know it's really, it stresses me out as well. Like, you just get a mental block and it just, everything just, well, for me anyway, it just goes out of my mind and it takes me a couple of minutes to think what I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's people always wonder about the title, and honestly, that's where that came from. I feel like I spend most of my life stumbling through space and time. And it was something I thought about in the moment, because I was like, well, in very few words, if I just had to say two or three, that's
Be so much
what
easier.
I'd come up with.
It's a brilliant title. Like I'm a proper sci-fi nerd, so I love any sci-fi references. That's why I'm wearing Doctor Who hoodie at the moment.
Oh yeah, that's one that comes up a lot.
So, how did your public speaking work start? And second part of that question, have you ever been discriminated at any work or any events that you've talked at because of your dyspraxia at all?
Yeah, it's something that in more recent years has started to coincide with my writing work. It comes from writing about the subject matter. It's very much a very contemporary author thing, where you write a certain amount of articles about it, you write a book about it, and people start to invite you to their events and things like that. So it really just happened through writing a lot and people just inviting me. And now the two worlds are basically part of each other. And so it's become an occasional part of my life, which is amazing. I think former me wouldn't have predicted it, because I was such a shy kid and I wasn't like a conventionally good speaker. But something about the subject matter kind of makes me very powerful and thoughtful and get the words out there, which is cool. And in terms of discrimination, I think I wrote about this for the Lead UK not too long ago. What a lot of disabled writers in general, I find, have to be really careful about is people's intentions for wanting lived experience perspectives.
Yeah.
Like some people can be very exploitive, and some people can want a whole inspiration. I don't know if I can swear at all of this podcast.
Yeah, you can. That's fine.
Inspiration bullshit take. And and they want you to be some larger than life, like I fell over, but I still persevered story. So a lot of the discrimination is just more from people having the wrong intentions, or not feeling that they having to fight an invoice or something like that. It's the not so glamorous side that I feel not a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you've been through that discrimination, but it is rife, and unfortunately, you're right. They want, even though you've lived the experience, they do. Some people do want a certain story, like you said, that they just from their angle to make them look good, to make them look good. But you're doing brilliantly now. Like, look, you're a writer, you're a public speaker. Like, I take my hat off to you. Like, I've got a lot of respect for you. You're doing amazing things and like spreading lots of awareness. It's brilliant. Which brings me on to, what would you say are your proudest moments and your biggest achievements?
Oh, proudest moments. The first time I spoke in front of a corporate audience was quite extraordinary to me, because I've always been completely ignored by that sort of world. And to hear people like being quiet and listening to what I have to say for a few minutes was really an eye-opening, and feeling like I was turning a corner moment. And that one to me really sort of sticks out. The first time I ever did that just happened to be right before Christmas.
Oh, wow. That's really recent.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well, not this Christmas. It was quite a few. It was like 2 or 3 Christmases ago. And it was, I had always been dismissed by that world. And just to hear people like taking my perspective seriously made me feel like I'd really turned a corner on being heard and understood by a group that previously dismissed me in previous years and wouldn't hire me in previous years.
Oh, that was a really massive achievement. Like, you definitely flipped the tables there. From, like you said, a lot of companies and aren't very inclusive, and then to actually have someone like yourself who's got lived experiences, and then they're all listening to you, like, that's a massive achievement, and you should be proud of yourself. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So the final question is, what are your wishes for the future, and what would you like to achieve? It's a three-part question, sorry. What are your wishes for the future? What would you like to achieve? And do you think anything needs to change to help support you and other people with disabilities?
Oh, better representation. I'm always cheering on the community, always wanting to see more dyspraxic children's books, more people speaking at events, more things like that. And the best we can do is really just check our intentions and reasoning for supporting people, and pay people fairly and reasonably, and be clear about our expectations. And that's how we start to get better representation and get more people of more backgrounds into these spaces.
No, I think they're all brilliant like wishes for the future, and I completely agree with all of them. Like, it's slowly changing, but still a lot of inequality out there, and still a lot of, like you said, that it would be brilliant to see more people like yourself, like children's books about dyspraxia would be brilliant. Like, you definitely deserve to win an award like for your book. I think it's fantastic. So where can like the listeners, if they want to like follow your story or buy your book, where can they find you?
All the major platforms, Amazon in the UK. I know I'm at the major bookstore. You can order through online through the major bookstores, Waterstones, WH Smith, stuff like that. But I also encourage you to support indie. There's lots of extraordinary indies that could use the support. Bookshop.org is a great way to do that, to figure out where locally works for you. And also the JKP store if you want to support the publisher directly.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, that's come to the end of this episode of Beyond Disabilities. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Rosemary for joining me on today's podcast. It's been really interesting talking to you, and you've been a fantastic guest. Yeah, so I hope to see you. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope you have a good, stay tuned for more episodes.